Welcome to the Start Here podcast for web development. I'm Keith Monahan.
And I'm Dane Miller.
And we're here to show you how to build a career in web dev. You can find us online at starthere.fm. Hi, Dane. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I am getting ready to go on a vacation. Family reunion.
Nice. Where to?
We're going up to Port Townsend, Washington. It's a gorgeous area up there.
Mm-hmm. Good coffee in Washington, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, I've stopped drinking coffee. It the acid doesn't feel so good. But tea, I drink tea. I don't know if they have good tea up in Washington.
You'll have to find out.
I will. I'll come back and let you know.
So how's your week been as far as web development goes?
It has been a roller coaster, actually. I've been putting out a lot of fires, actually. We've had different issues here and there, and so there hasn't been as much building as I would like, but there's been a lot of support, a lot of working with clients.
And these are like production issues mainly?
Yeah, so we host email for a lot of our clients, and so there's been some email issues and kind of some server issues, and so we've just been working through that. It's been very exciting.
Yeah, it's always a huge challenge when there's a bunch of production issues. I'm glad you guys have gotten that cleared up.
Yeah, definitely. So it's good. How was your week?
Pretty uneventful. There's no production issues. That's good. Might have some new clients coming down the pipe. That's interesting. A lot of just normal sort of day-to-day work though. Working on a new iOS app. That's fun.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's cool. Do you code Objective-C?
I try to sometimes. I mean, I do occasionally. I have like a little hobby app that I'm building, a timers app, but this one is just for the place that I work at. Basically, we're building a sort of a podcast player interfacing with a certain other. There's some sort of hidden features right now until it's launched, but we're building a podcast app.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's exciting. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's challenging and it's fun because the podcast app, as I was telling you earlier, it's like one of those things where it just grows in complexity and you can't really find a cap to it. It just keeps going.
Yeah, there's no such thing as, oh, hey, I have a simple idea for this thing.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't exist.
Well, they always start super simple, right?
Well, yeah, but that's what it always gets more complex.
Yeah.
That's fun, though.
Yeah, so that's what I've been doing this week.
Today, we're going to talk about what it takes to launch your first website. And we're going to cover a lot of different considerations from like just the very basics that are required to launch your website to a lot of other things that you need to consider when launching your website that aren't necessarily required, but that are good to do. Yeah,
we wanted to take you through the whole process, sort of step by step, as though we were doing it. So as though we were about to deploy a website that we just built maybe over the weekend, and just take you through what we think about. And maybe that will add value to you next time you go to do the same.
Yeah. So right now, let's consider that you have a website you've built. It's on your computer. You've got the files and pictures and all that stuff. It's on your computer somewhere. Now, what do you do?
So for me, I mean, we could both say what we each do, obviously, but for me, I guess the first thing I'll start with is evaluating I'll start with the domain first, usually. Probably I will have the domain purchased before the idea, so before the thing is actually built.
So do you come up with the name before you start building the product?
Yeah, I like to see the name in my head and see the idea sort of in my head that way. So I feel like that helps me. And also when you purchase a domain, it's kind of like an investment. So you kind of are saying to yourself, I'm committing myself to build this at some point.
Yeah, but let's be honest. How many domains do you own right now?
Well, I'm not one of those people that compulsively purchases domains, but I mean, I know some people that have hundreds of domains, right? But
oh, wow.
The ones that I do purchase, I try to be very specific. I literally only have the projects that I've done. So
that's good.
I try to use it that way. And if you're somebody that's new to this, like that's listening to this and you don't have any domains, I would encourage you to do it that way, to not buy hundreds and hundreds of domains, although that can be a different that's actually a financial thing as well. But actually just purchase the ones that you want to work on, and it can be like a commitment thing for yourself.
Yeah. I would probably start with like one domain that's kind of going to be your primary domain, maybe for your personal website. And then if you want to launch, other websites, you could do them as subdomains of that one, as opposed
that brings up an interesting topic though, Keith. Like, this is the first website they've built. Mm-hmm. So let's pretend that. Now, most people, are they going to have it be a personal website where it's all about them? And if so, would you use your name.com, or would you actually make it like quirky, like, thefunnylady.com? Like,
mm-hmm.
How there's two different schools of thought there?
Right. Yeah. So your domain name could be literal for what it is, or something fun that might be more memorable. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess what I was getting at is that, the listener may have an idea for a product or a website. And, if I went out and bought a domain for every idea I had that I was starting to build, I'd have tons. But what you can do is you can start with a primary domain, whatever you end up calling it. And then you could just add your website as a subdomain or something like that, just to get it up there and get it live, kind of test it, have fun, play with it, share it. And then, when it's built, move it to its own domain maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another thing that you can consider, the listener, when buying your first domain, you'll often have an idea for a product or a project or a brand. So you'll be like theplannergirl.com, and you'll think to yourself like, that's awesome and that's quirky and that's a great little brand. And that's true, it is. But you have to keep in mind you're penciling yourself into that forever, right? Whereas you could be yourname.com, like I could be danemiller.com if that's available, and then it would allow me to hold all the projects that I'm working on. So it becomes more valuable to you if you drive traffic to something that contains multiple projects that you're working on. So for this to be your first website, definitely think about that, because I've actually just met some people that have run into that branding issue, and they've needed to rethink, and so it can be a problem.
Yeah. And sometimes that first website, the first domain you buy, can kind of be your primary like home on the internet, where you kind of do a lot of things from. And so when you're naming it, maybe try to future-proof it. So it should be something that you don't mind sharing to friends and family and, potential employers. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah. Agreed.
In our last episode, the Web Dev Toolbot, we talked about a few different places you can buy some domains and some different tools you can use to search for some domains. So we're not going to go into that. But let's just say that you've got your website built, you've got your domain name purchased, and you're ready for some hosting. The place that you buy your domain doesn't necessarily have to be the same place where you host your website files. So they can be two different places. And I think that's how most people end up doing it at this level. They have one place that's kind of their primary go-to place to buy domains. Like, how do you do it, Dane?
Well, so if you're just brand new to this space, having two separate places to host and to have your domain purchased can be kind of complicated. And also, when you're more on the advanced side, you'll probably have a lot of accounts to manage, and people don't like that. So, it affects both levels of people, I think. But there's certain things like HostGator where you can actually go, and it will allow you to buy the domain and buy the hosting.
And that was pretty cheap, right?
Yeah, it's actually $3 a month for their seed, for I think it's like their hatchling plan, and that's really good value, actually. I use that for some of my personal projects, and then you can go ahead and get the domain right there, so it manages it for you. The problem with that, though, is you have to keep in mind that it's kind of nice to just use a site like Hover or Namecheap or Gandhi to manage all your domains so that you literally can see them all. Right. So that's kind of important to be able to see everything that you bought and manage it. Whereas on a thing like HostGator, you can't really do that. You have to log into each account separately.
Okay.
And that can be a huge pain in the butt. And that can be a huge pain. But then what you want to do, I think, is to go with the separate route, even though it's a little bit more of a separation there. That's just what I do.
Yeah, that's what I do as well. I think I have all of mine at Namecheap.
I use Hover.
Hover. Okay. Yeah. And so there's disadvantages and advantages to both. If you want to get something up quick and on the cheap, it sounds like HostGator is a pretty good option. I've never used it, but it sounds pretty decent.
So caveat all of this with the fact that I'm almost certain that there's going to be a percentage of people that perhaps are listening to this that have a domain on GoDaddy.
Oh, okay.
And we've all migrated from GoDaddy. I think maybe you have as well. If you're listening to this, you probably migrated away as well for a number of reasons that we don't have to go into, but they're just not the best moral or ethical company at all. So everybody tries to
technically as well. I mean, if you're on a shared hosting plan, sometimes it seems like we mentioned this in the last episode. Sometimes it seems like their servers are kind of overloaded, or they're just not very fast in some cases. And so, in general, especially if you're running a WordPress site, if it's on a shared hosting at GoDaddy, it seems to run noticeably slower than even a shared hosting plan on other places. Just in my personal experience.
And that's good to know. But actually, Hover will do a domain transfer concierge service for you. So they will literally get the domain, like you give them your account, and they will get your domains and bring them over for you. Nice. So if you want to go with a place that just is super easy, I would definitely choose Hover.
Okay, yeah, because there are some technicalities to actually moving a domain from one registrar to another, and so it sounds like they'll take care of that. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's assume you've got your domain now, you've figured out your hosting, and you're ready to deploy. So you want to send your files up to the host. And we'll get into how to do that in just a second.
Yeah.
But there's some things to think about before you do that. And some of these things fall between the cracks, but they're good to consider for a number of different reasons. I guess the first recommendation I have, and it's probably the biggest, and it can affect how quickly your website loads, it's to optimize your images. So we're talking about not only resizing the image so that if you're displaying your image at, say, 400 pixels square, that your image is actually 400 pixels square. Because you could use CSS to scale that down, but then you're loading, way more content than you need to. So rescale it down to the size, only the size it needs to be. But then also to optimize it, it's talking about optimizing the quality. So you can compress it, you can use like JPEG, and then you can change the quality instead of 100% down to I don't know, I usually do 60%. That essentially removes a lot of extra information from the picture that you can't notice, but that might be there. Like if you wanted to print the image, you would want all that there. But for the web, decreasing the quality a little bit is just fine.
Agreed.
Yes. So there are a number of ways to do that. You can do that through WordPress when you save for devices. But you can also, if you're using WordPress, you can use a plugin called smush.it, that will automatically optimize the quality when you upload it. So how do you optimize images, Dane?
So I do all my work in Rails. So we have some tools in Rails. I think they're consistent across any Nix platform, such as any Unix-based platform. So ImageMagick is one of those tools, and there are a lot of gems that sort of sit between ImageMagick on the terminal and as a system level utility, and then ImageMagick in your application, which is quote unquote the API for ImageMagick, right? So I'll just use that, which is something that you kind of install into your app, quote unquote. It's sort of like a WordPress plugin. You could think of it that way. If you're using Rails, there's a bunch of gems. If you just search for ImageMagick under rubygems.org, you'll find a bunch of great ones sorted by popularity.
Cool.
And I usually just go with the most popular one.
Okay. So that's a good way if you're on Rails.
Yeah.
It's fun. Awesome. So, optimize your images. That's very important. Okay. So not only does it take up more bandwidth, but it slows down your site. And one of the things that's important as far as your page speed, I mean, besides the fact that a slow website, a user is going to jump, they're going to bail if your website is too slow. What do you know how long it is before someone typically bails? Is like 10 seconds or something?
Well, there's two statistics that are alarming, and I don't know either one of them, but one is like the video bounce rate the time at which you bounce from a video if it doesn't load. And then there's the website one. The website one is really tiny. It's like
4 seconds, right?
Yeah, it's it's anywhere from, I mean, I don't know the statistic exactly, but I know for a fact it's between 4 and 15 seconds. So regardless, whatever it is, that's pretty incredible. So your website has to be fast as possible.
Right. So that's one reason to optimize. The other reason is that if you're looking to have your website show up in a search engine, and we know that Google is the primary search engine, they actually take your website speed into consideration when they rank you. So if you want to be at the top, your website, among many other things, your website has to be fast.
Yeah. So yeah, Google will crawl your site, and the time it takes for the request to return data, if it's a really long time, then Google will dox you. So you got to be careful.
So as we're talking about SEO, another thing that is important to remember when you're getting ready to launch your website is, and this has to do with images again, it's important to use alt tags on your images. That's in the HTML. That's the HTML image attribute. Because for one, so there's 3 reasons really. If your image doesn't load, then that alt tag provides a description of that image, which is important for the user. If the user can't see and they're using some sort of a screen reader, then the user has some sort of indication about what the image would be. But also for SEO, because Google reads those alt tags, and so that's another way. If you articulate very well what that image is about in the alt tag, that can help your SEO as well.
And also just the fact that you're supposed to have alt tags, the more HTML valid, or the more valid your HTML is, the better. So Google will take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, technically your website doesn't validate unless your images have alt tags. Any other things we should consider here before someone launches a website, Dane?
So yeah, I think one thing is that people really need to step back and think about the user experience, or the UX, and the UI as well when they're building these sites. So let's say that this is a person's personal site and it's theirname.com and it's got a picture of them and some text. You will probably build that site and you'll feel really stoked that you were able to get through all the technical know-how that was required to do that. And that's great. But you also have to think like, okay, as a user, I'm going to visit the site and do what? So, I mean, for a personal site, it's kind of ambiguous, right? You're just kind of looking, maybe you're just looking at the person and then you're leaving. But maybe you have like an about page and it's like a resume and you're trying to get people to click that or something. I mean, you have to really take these things into account, like what your action and what your purpose of having this website is. And it can be ambiguous. That's totally fine. It's just that the more ambiguous it is, the more challenging it's going to be for you to put yourself in the mind state of the users visiting it, right?
Yeah. So you have to consider what your user is going to experience when you get there and like what you want them to do. I mean, if it's just a site you're throwing up just for the heck of it, and I guess if you're not asking the user to do anything, then it may not matter so much. But if you want the user to do something, then
you always want the user to do something. I mean, even if you say you don't, you have a website for a reason. Either it's a joke or it's just a picture of you and that's it. You still want the user to do something, right? Like, so you want copy that gets their attention. If you're just like a 1-page site, I feel like that's a misnomer. Like, you always want somebody to do something, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true. And so, following this line of thought, you'll become familiar with the term call to action.
Yeah.
And so when you have a website and you want somebody to do something, the area of the website where you want them to take action, right? That's the call to action. So maybe it's a button. Maybe your whole purpose for this website is to have somebody click on this button that maybe takes them somewhere else or it does something. I don't know.
Or maybe it's just a read, right? Like, so your call to action could be a paragraph and that's it. And then you'll have to make that paragraph really stand out and look really nice and be quick to load, right?
Maybe larger text than your typical, 12 point or 16 point or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So people should think about the user experience when they're building their site.
Here are a few good tricks to use if you want to think or put yourself in the mind state of somebody visiting your site. These are things that big agencies do, and maybe, you haven't been exposed to, but that's why we're here to sort of pass this down. So basically, you can literally take your site to your parents or to your friends or to your girlfriend or whoever, and basically get them to use it and literally stand behind them and watch them use it. And that's like a really neat trick that nobody ever does and nobody ever thinks about, because it just, it's like non-intuitive in a way. But big digital agencies, they do it all the time. They bring people in and they call it focus testing or focus grouping or some variation of that. And then basically they will just watch people use their site and they won't do anything else. And then they'll take notes and then they'll revise the site and ask questions after the person's done.
Yeah. So user testing, and that's on I don't think people do it enough, because you can get really good feedback by watching people use your site.
And there's in the next couple of years, there's some real innovations coming in this area. There's some stuff coming out that will track the user's eyeballs with their webcam.
Oh, I've been wondering about that.
Yeah, it'll let you analyze where people are looking, because attention is becoming like a priced commodity. So where somebody looks is almost going to be like the future of advertising, right? Like it is now, but it will be even more targeted, which is interesting.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I don't know. Maybe I can. It's like monetizing the human experience.
Well, I don't want to do that part, but I would love to use it for my own sites, right? To see like how people are utilizing them and what are they looking at that button? I really want them to, and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely want that information, but at the same time, I have this, I don't know.
It would be exploited.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Yeah. So a couple more things we wanted to mention about the UI, the user experience. Whenever you're like on your contact page, whenever you're listing your address or a phone number or an email address. As a side note, I mean, the internet is pretty big and there's crazy people out there. So just consider what information you're putting out there. Whenever you're listing...
Gold rule of thumb is never put your real physical address out there.
Mm-hmm.
Although that rule has changed in the past couple of years. It used to be a hard and fast rule back when the internet first came out, all the way up into about, 2005 or something, until Web 2.0 really hit off. And then people started putting all their information online. So, I mean, it's a personal choice at this point.
Yeah. And maybe people started using it when they're signing up for services and things, but I don't know that I would ever just put it on my website.
Yeah, I don't ever see a reason why, unless you run a business out of your house, and then I still don't see a reason. I would get a P.O. box.
I would do a separate P.O. box, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
It's just there's too many weird people out there.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. So on the contact page, if you list your address, phone number, email address, make those links. Okay, it's really simple to take the address, put it in an anchor tag, and then if you're going to do the address, like a business address, go to Google Maps, type in the address, and then copy the URL for that address and use that. That's important. And then for the phone number, instead of HTTP in front of the URL, you would use tel, T-E-L, and then +1, and then just the full phone number.
Yeah, and that's actually going to be really useful when the new version of Mac comes out and you can make phone calls from your computer. Mm-hmm. That will sync to your phone. So like there'll be millions of people with this OS, and your phone number is just one click away. And they don't have to pull out their cell phone. So you always want to be thinking, how can I reduce friction? So whatever I want my user to do, how can I reduce the amount of steps I want them to take to get there, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting. I had heard about, because with Skype, if you have Skype installed on your computer and maybe in your browser, you can make calls that way.
But there's restrictions. You have to pay for the monthly Skype to make outbound phone calls.
Yeah, but some people do have that service.
Yeah, some people do.
And so if, I typically use an anchor on the phone number for that, but then also for mobile, if somebody's on mobile, because it's super easy to tag. Yeah. I had no idea that Apple was going to link your computer with your phone.
Yeah, well, first of all, I do use it for mobile. I think that's the coolest thing, is when I go to a website and they have their phone number and I just tap it. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so great. But yeah, they're going to be, they have this new feature coming out where basically you can send text messages from your Mac, not just to iMessages, but to anybody that has an actual phone that is an Android or whatever. But then also
through your phone number,
will get an incoming call, and then it'll pop up on your computer, and you can take it with your Apple headset plugged into your computer. It's going to be awesome.
Wow.
That's cool. Yeah, and it's really good if you just want to take, your meetings from your laptop instead of having to juggle your phone around along with your computer. I think it'll be fun.
That is pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I wish my computer did that now.
Well, Maybe in the future.
I guess
If Microsoft won't ever do that.
That's sad. Oh well. And so the last thing we wanted to mention about the user experience is that your website has to be responsive. So responsive web design is when the width of your web page responds to the width of the device, meaning it's the same exact website on a desktop computer as it is on a laptop, tablet, and mobile phone, and it should look good and have a good user experience on all of those devices.
And we encourage you to test all those devices too, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't have to have a phone to test on an iPhone or on an Android phone. There are websites that we will have links in the description. Keith, tell them where to go to find the links.
You can go to starthere.fm/webdev/5 for our show notes today.
Yep. And basically we're going to have all the websites that will allow you to emulate devices there. So you can use all those to test on an iPhone. You don't ever have to get up from your computer. Really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so when I'm developing, I am constantly, well, not constantly, but when I'm working to make my sites responsive, I'm in my, on my phone. Yep. All the time. We talked about SEO a little bit. So this is something that is incredibly important as well if you want to be in the search engines. In fact, I would say this is probably like the foundational type stuff for search engine optimization. And this is how Google is going to find and kind of put your site in the same category. Yeah, on the map and in the same category.
It's like this is required to actually have your site ranked for the keywords that you might have it ranked for, right? So it's like, give us a little SEO 101.
Yeah, exactly. So let alone ranking at the top, this is just so you can actually rank. So your website needs to have a title tag and a description. And so the title is what's displayed in your browser tab when you go and you kind of, whatever it says up there, you can hover over it to see the whole tag. Whatever it says up there is what you're going to see in the Google search results. That's the title you see. And I believe, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe it's about 72 characters. That's the maximum that you can have in there. And then the description on the website is what is shown in the search engine below that. And that gives a short synopsis about your website. And so those things need to be dialed in because that is what people see in the search engine. And so if it's just some gibberish, or if Google automatically has to pull that from your website, then it may not be the best call to action, to go and click onto your website. So those are the two most important parts as far as SEO. And we consider that on-site optimization. That's SEO optimization for like on your website. All right, so Dane, what are some other things we should think about?
Another thing that I find really interesting is the mental states that you have when you're developing and deploying a website. And one of those states, even digital agencies and almost any company will have this state of a website, is testing. So you have this phase of testing. And I really encourage you to go through those same states as a digital agency would when you're building your own personal site. So those are planning, sort of like strategizing, planning, maybe preliminary development and like getting administrative stuff taken care of, actual development, and then administrative post development, and then testing, and then deploying to staging, and then deploying to production. So you have all those stages, and it's actually really helpful because you can think of each one as a sprint, and it actually will lead, because these projects tend to be kind of ambiguous, right? And it's difficult to actually accomplish them. But if you segment them up that way, it will be nicer to do, I find, for me personally.
There's a reason there's a process, is because it helps you think through what you need to think through when you should think through it. And then if you do the small steps, then when your website kind of builds itself, the project comes together.
Exactly. So the whole point of me saying that is because say you did that preliminary development / design, and you did that UX thinking, and you did that UI thinking. Well, then when you go to the testing phase and you start to click on everything and you start going through everything, and now you're at the end of the process, you're not going to be running up into these issues where your design and your UX isn't meeting standards, right? So if you think about everything in the segmented steps that the process allots for, at the end, you will just have the one job of testing. And I say that because the testing phase is usually the phase that is the most, it causes the most ruckus. Oftentimes people have to rewrite entire sections of their site in the more corporate worlds, or, just it brings up a lot of stuff. So you want to make sure you are locked down by the time you get there.
And let's say this. Obviously, it is considerably easier to draw a new wireframe of your website than it is to rewrite the structure of your website with HTML, PHP, or whatever.
That's a good point. Yes.
So you want to do all of the thinking on paper before you have to start coding. I know you don't. I never want to, but I'm always glad that I did when I do. And then finally, you definitely want to make sure that you're tracking your users to see what kind of response you're getting on your website. So, there's a few different options, but pretty much the industry standard is Google Analytics. And you can set up an account to, create your analytics profile and then add your website. And then you just add a small snippet of code to the site that will track your users. And you can go in there and you can see how many people have visited your site each day and some other really interesting information. So those are some things that we think you should consider, before you launch the site, that sometimes get missed. And in fact, we totally forgot to add the Google Analytics to our webpage, the starthere.fm, before we launched. It was like a week later we discovered we'd missed it.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a couple days. But,
okay.
But I was definitely embarrassed.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Anyway, so it helps to have a list of these things. So maybe we can try to come up with something. But at my job, I've created this document that helps me go through the process of things that I need to consider as I'm building, and then before I launch, and then after launch, and all that kind of stuff. So once you have a flow down, it's good to write it down and then just kind of go through the checklist. Yeah,
and it's really specific to the platform. Right. So that we would love to provide you all a document that's like, here's everything you need to think about. And we're going to do an episode that is an outline of the entire development process. So the beginning strategy all the way to the end deployment. But it, to provide you a list is really like a specific thing. If you're using WordPress, it's different than if you're using Rails.
Mm-hmm. For
so
deployment.
Just keep. Right. For the whole process, right?
That's true.
Uploading the files, pretty much everything. So you kind of have to keep that in mind. And as you're building your first website, write down what was super challenging, write down what was easy, and just bullet points. And then later when you're building your websites, you'll keep all those in mind, right? You'll be like, I'm going to automate this part or use this tool or plugin for this one because it took me 3 hours.
Mm-hmm. And we say write it down, and we really mean just open up a new document somewhere like in Google Docs or something and literally just list stuff out as you think of it. You will really appreciate having that list later on.
And that's actually a really good point that we brought that up right now, because we did want to close the episode just sort of touching on the difference between deploying and uploading PHP apps to Ruby on Rails or Python apps. So the difference between FTP and command line, really, CLI.
Yeah. So this is the where deployment comes in. Like, how do you get your website from your computer to the internet?
Why don't you take us through the PHP path, and then I'll take us through the Ruby path.
Sure. Yeah. And I can provide you some, as far as my experience goes. If you're using a service like HostGator, or like a lot of other web hosts, then they actually a lot of times have like a one-click install for WordPress. And if that's the case, then deploying your WordPress site can actually be pretty easy. So if you've got WordPress set up on your computer, you could use Duplicator and, export the WordPress package from your local host, and then you could like FTP that up to your live site, run the duplicator script to install that, and you'd be good to go. And that's a pretty it's a pretty simple process, I think, for doing WordPress sites. And so it requires some knowledge or experience with FTPing items to your site, and then also setting up databases on there as well. The alternative is that if you wanted to use something like HostGator and do like the one-click install, you could actually just build your site live on your web host instead of on your computer. It's not quite as easy, but you wouldn't have to worry about the file transfers and stuff.
Yeah, and that's for starthere.fm, the site that we have. That's what we did. So we edit it live, or at least I do. And I find it super helpful.
Yeah, for small sites, editing live isn't too big of a deal. But if you get to a big site, you're definitely not going to want to, edit stuff live just in case, there's a soft chance you break something.
Yeah, definitely.
So how do you deploy with Ruby on Rails and other applications, Dane?
So let's consider the fact that somebody came into this with a application that maybe they built in Rails following the Rails tutorial, or Python following a Django tutorial. Those are two completely separate things. Maybe it's Node as well. A bunch of these are going to require a few things. Okay, so first, you're going to look at all the hosts that provide the best benefit for the platform you're on. So for Ruby on Rails, sometimes it's Heroku, because you can get an application up in less than 2 minutes, almost in less than a minute. Literally, you install their command line, their CLI, and then basically you run 2 commands from the terminal, and your application gets copied from your local machine up to the server, and then the server is reset for you automatically.
Nice.
And other providers such as AppFog and EngineYard will take PHP applications like Laravel. They'll take Node.js applications. Like we deployed at the State Department, we deployed Node.js on EC2. So it basically comes down to the fact that either you're going to be using FTP or a command line utility, or just literally bash to copy the files that you need from your local machine up to a server using FTP or SSH, and then you're going to be restarting the server. So, I mean, that's basically, when you boil it down to its ultimate simplicity, it's copy and restart, and then sometimes reload or restart the database as well. So, Ruby on Rails, there just happens to be a more automated solution. A bunch of tools are coming out with these automated solutions because this is the last thing developers need to be spending their time with.
Yeah.
And you need to be focused on building great things, not like deploying them, really. Well, I mean, you need to be focused on deploying them, but not like the process of deploying them, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's pretty cool. So when I used Duplicator on a site, let's see, I launched a site on Wednesday, I think, to the live server. And so I think the whole process took me 15 to 20 minutes. And that was time. Well, but that included setting up a new account on our servers, and then adding the database, doing the Duplicator archive, and then uploading it to the new server, and then running the install and stuff like that. So it took that much time, but it was fairly simple to do.
See, the interesting thing about this is there's like a time efficiency ratio. I've used Heroku for Rails for years, right? For clients, small and medium, but never big. And I just recently met a client that is pretty big, and they're currently on Heroku, and I was transferred all the code. So it's like, I'm in this new code base and it's on Heroku, and the first thought I think to myself is, oh, wow, I've heard bad things about this host with really large scale sites. So, but the thing is, Heroku offers so much value in efficiency for how to deploy and manage Ruby on Rails, and even how to debug production issues. So literally you can tunnel your way into the production instance and then fire up a Rails console within like 35 seconds. And then basically you can query the live application to deduce problems and maybe double check a database schema, something. And then, same for migrating the database, right? It's like one command to migrate whatever data. And I know it's easy to migrate databases usually in other applications as well, but I mean, it's just one of those things where it's really neat. And so you have to keep in mind the efficiency for the specific platform you're on. Maybe it's a 15-minute process, but you're getting all this efficiency. Totally worth it.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And part of it comes down to getting used to whatever development environment you choose.
Yeah.
Because I'm definitely not as familiar or comfortable in the command line, even though I would like to be soon.
Right. And with that being said, why don't you give them an outline, Keith, of what the next episode is and how we're going to touch on exactly that topic of what development environment or what platform you want to develop on might be.
So we want to provide a nice overview of the different server-side languages and frameworks and environments that you could choose to develop in. And you kind of make this choice to begin with, and it doesn't necessarily lock you into that choice. And we hope that it doesn't, right? We want you to expand into explore lots of different things. But we want you to stick with a particular language or environment for a while so that you can kind of experience some efficiencies there and really get excited about building some things. And so we're going to cover some of the things we talked about, I guess, but in more in depth as far as some of the frameworks for PHP and for, Ruby on Rails is basically a framework using Ruby.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to provide you a nice overview so that just like the front end, we hope you got a good overview from the last couple episodes. We want to do that same job on the server side. So, even if you're going to be a front end developer and you're making that choice now, I would suggest listening to these episodes in the future. This next one specifically on servers, even if you're inclined to skip it, because it's better to be aware, right? Mm-hmm. It's better to be aware of the full stack when you enter the job market so that you're not surprised by anything.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks for listening today. We want to introduce something we're pretty excited about. We want to help you out by reviewing your website and giving you some feedback. So we want to do a website design review for you, and we'd like you to leave a submission. So leave your website, whatever you want us to review, in the comments of our show page today. You can find that at starthere.fm/webdev/5, and we will take some time and look over your website.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this as well. But keep in mind, when you do submit your sites, it's a design-focused review. So user experience, user interface, design. But also, if it's just a Tumblr site that you built and maybe you've modified for like 30 minutes, submit that too. We'd love to do a quick critique. I mean, you can have the choice of making it public or not on the form, so it's not a big deal. And we will, be respectful of that choice.
Yeah. So in the comment, just mention whether.
Or yeah, in the comment.
Yeah, in the comment, just mention whether you want us to, whether it's okay for us to publish the review, or whether you just want some feedback personally.
Yeah, because ideally we want other people to gain value from these reviews as well. So if it's not super personal, tell us, we can publish it and we will put it on a separate section of our site. Hopefully it'll drive some traffic to you in the future, but also it'll add value to these other people. Perhaps they have similar sites, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe they have gone through some similar issues. So
yeah, totally.
We're excited about that. We want to help you guys, and so send us your sites. Let's take a look. Well, that is our episode for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you come back and listen next episode to episode 6, where we talk about the backend server environment, languages, and frameworks. You can find me on Twitter at KeithMon, KeithMon.
And I'm Dane Miller on Twitter, DainMiller.
Thanks. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.